Well, I looked for quite a while to try to find the pinout on the R10 RC receiver, but I really couldn't. So I couldn't really say exactly what happens on the receiver side. But this is the 765 wing, and right here's the 3 pins you're looking for. Could be just 2. Ground in RX6 if you get 5 volts from another place. I usually just pick up 5 volts right here and use a 3-pin RC DuPont connector like we've had for 50 years. Right across these 3 pins, ground, voltage, and signal. And this would be the SBUS signal. Whatever pin on the RC receiver, I would put ground to ground. Whatever pin on the RC receiver needs voltage, I would put it on this voltage pin, as long as the V5 voltage of 4.4 volts to 4.8 volts will power the receiver. I imagine it will. Again, I can't find any information. I do have a SkyDroid FPV video receiver, but that's all experience I have with SkyDroid. But this receive 6 pin right here is where you connect the SBUS. Now then, after that, if you're running INav, I have to go back and look at your message again. I don't know if you were trying to run INav or Ardu plane, copter, an Ardupilot of some flavor. But all you should have to do inside INav would be to flip this serial RX switch right here on UART6, as long as you do put the SBUS on the receive pin right here of UART6. That's all you have to do. Flip this switch, save and reboot. When it reboots, come into the receiver, and truthfully, by default, it's set up for a serial receiver and a SBUS. You're finished. Right at that moment, you should be able to move the sticks and get movement in these indicators right here on the left. And exactly the same thing for Ardupilot, Ardu plane, Ardu copter, Ardu rover, Ardu sub, whatever. It's set up by default to work. You don't have to do any configuration inside Ardupilot to get the SBUS receiver to work. So I'm not sure what else to say about that. That's just straight up across the board. Ground supply voltage for the receiver, and then the SBUS on the receive 6 here, and in INav this switch must be flipped. Can't be like that. Gotta be a serial RX defined someplace. Gotta be on the correct UART too, which is 6. Well, yes, technically you could get ground here, voltage here, and decide you're going to do receiver 1 for SBUS and connect SBUS right here, and the only difference you'd have is when you came in here, you'd have to go to UART 1 and say that's where your serial receiver is. In my opinion, it's just easier to pick up your ground, your voltage, and deposit your signal right here on RX6, which by default right down here tells you that RX6 UART receive pin for serial RX. It's set up in the hardware on the F765 wing by default to be where it's looking for serial RX. And PPM signal can also be put on RX6. Looking down here, it says SBUS can be connected to any unused UART receive pin RX. And that's to any UART. Yeah, so I would do that. These 3 pins. Go into INav. Tell it my serial receiver is on UART 6. Save and reboot, and you're finished. I'm going to set that up real quick on a little receiver and F765 wing here. And I'll be right back. All right. Let's look here real quick. We'll go into the Crossfire configuration. Oops. Real quick, just to verify. So our Crossfire Nano receiver is connected to the flight controller, and let's see, output map. You can see right there, channel 1 is SBUS. So that's how the receiver is set up. It's hooked to UART 6, basically on the first 3 pins. I know there's 3 more pins in that connector, but I'm not using them. So let's see if we come in here to INav. Just waiting on the COM port up here to, there we go, COM 5, 115.200, connect. Now by default, this is a fresh install of INav 2.6.1. And by default in the ports tab, come on, there we go. By default in the ports tab, because UART 6 is set up by default as the RC input port, UART 6 is already set to serial RX. That's all already set. If you had it on, just like the documentation said, SBUS can be put on any unused RX receive pin of any port. And the only thing you would do here is if it's on a different port, you just come in here and find the port and click the serial RX on that port. If it was on 3, you would put serial RX here. It's not, it's on 6. That's the default. So this is set without doing a single thing to the software. Also over here for receiver, by default, 2.6.1 INav is set by default to a serial receiver. It's also set by default to SBUS. So right now, if I go over here on my radio and move sticks, we have activity right there. So there's the only thing that has to be done with the Crossfire Nano on INav is wire ground to ground, supply voltage to supply voltage, and SBUS to the receive pin on UART 6 right here. I'll go back with my layout. So that's all for that. Now then, while I'm here, let's disconnect here real quick. Go into firmware flasher, load firmware local. This is Ardupilot 4.0.9. We'll flash that to the board real quick, not changing the receiver at all. It's a Crossfire Nano. Let me see if I can go back and get my pin out up on the 765 real quick while that's flashing. It finished flashing in the background. I can tell just by the sound. While that flight controller page is coming up, I have to go out here and disconnect the, let me check first that it finished. Programming successful, yep, so we'll close that. Go out here and we'll disconnect the USB port and we'll reconnect it so that everything is reset. Well, what? End of life. F765 wing will be discontinued due to STM32F765V IT6 shortage. In other words, the controller chip, this main chip right here. What the hey? So I can't get to my layout information no more? Come on. Oh, my wife's upstairs on the computer in a seminar. So this isn't as big. I'm going to use this layout real quick. So right here is what I was doing. Ground 4.5 volts and connecting SBUS to the receive pin RX6 of UART6. So now then, let's go into Mission Planner. COM 8, 115-200, click Connect. Mission Planner is a little different. There can be some things in Mission Planner that cause people to think that they don't have their controls working, when in fact they do. Now we're connected in Mission Planner, Ardupilot 4.0.9, current stable version. You can come into Setup, Mandatory Hardware, Servo Output. Now right here is where people and Ardupilot get confused, because Ardupilot pops up with the flight controller working. INav does too. But you notice right now, Ardupilot's in return to launch mode, accidentally, which means all of these inputs are being affected automatically. So if you look down at the table right now, if I move the stick, it appears it's not really working well, because channel 1 just moves a little bit. It doesn't go up to 1900, doesn't go down to 1000. Do a little bit of pitch, that's not working. Throttle, well, that's not working. Well, it's because the flight controller's intercepting all these right now. So we're going to go up here on channel 5, aux 1, and of course my channel 5 switch on the radio doesn't do anything at this moment. You have to come in here and enable pass-through. And now there's my switch 982. I flip it, it's up to 2005. You can see that switch is working perfectly. So everything is working perfectly. If I want to see the actual
values here being reflected, properly, you have to come out here, go into actions, here, set manual mode, right here, click. Now you're in manual mode right here in this. And now if we go back here and I do my roll, look, it goes up to 1900 and it goes down to 1100. It's actually straight pass through now. Same thing with pitch. See? Same thing with yaw. And of course my switch 5, it's still working. But if we look at throttle, throttle is still not working. Well, of course not. It's not armed. So to see your throttle, you'd have to come out here and say arm, disarm. Do you wish to force arm? Sure. Now it's armed. Now if we go back into that same area and do the throttle, look at that. It works now. So there is 765 wing, Crossfire Nano SBUS. I don't have an R10 receiver. I can't find the wiring pin-out on an R10 receiver on the internet. If I had it physically in my hand, I could figure it out. So I don't know really the pin-out on that receiver, so I can't really do much with that. The only thing I could do was hook up what I had, an SBUS receiver. So it doesn't matter if that's Crossfire, Futaba, Easy UHF, whatever. It's an SBUS receiver set into SBUS on RX6 of UART6 pin on a 765 wing. This is a fresh copy of Ardupilot 4.0.9. I did not change a single parameter at all inside this. Everything is as it flashes the firmware out of the box. The only thing I did was over in setup here, I changed some of the servo pass through and other things so I could verify my servos were working. So with SBUS on any receiver connected to RX6, UART6 on 765 wing, there is nothing I need to do at all inside INav 2.6.1 and Ardupilot 4.0.9 to make it work. It is mostly a matter of getting those 3 wires correct: ground, supply voltage, and SBUS signal.